Now, as from midnight, South Africa will be ushering in level 4 of the lockdown restrictions, while a high number of people will be going back to work. Not much is expected to change, but there are many questions that are remaining unanswered. Legal questions, constitutional questions. Let's try and work through some of those. Constitutional law expert Professor Pierre de Vos joining us via Skype. Professor, good afternoon to you. So we have a curfew. Extreme powers given to law enforcement officials. Is this really necessary? And some are saying this could be a real threat to our democratic freedoms.
Well, you know, all the regulations are subject to the Bill of Rights, also the rule of law requirements that it must be rational. So I don't think you can say one size fits all. You have to take each regulation on its own, and then you have to ask, in terms of the Bill of Rights, is there an infringement? Of course, anything that limits your movement, that's a limitation of your rights. And then the big problem is, I don't know if we have enough information for why some of these rules have been made, and how do these rules actually relate to the purpose of the lockdown. Some of the rules do not seem to have a very strong rational link to the lockdown purpose, and that would make them probably unconstitutional. You know, like banning cigarettes, for example. How is that related to flattening the curve? There doesn't seem to be one. It seems to be more like a general public health concern, and you cannot smuggle in a general concern about something else, the crime rate, bad health habits and so on, when you are actually dealing with this matter. I think that is one of the problems. And we are not given enough information about what is the purpose of each of these regulations that actually limit our rights quite drastically.
So, Professor, if we're not being given enough information, surely that then raises serious questions over the National Command Council, for that matter the provincial command councils, the powers they have, and whether there is enough oversight being exercised, if there's any oversight at all.
Yes, so I'm aware of the letter that was sent to the President yesterday by two lawyers, in which they say we don't actually know what the authority of the Command Council is, and where the power lies, because obviously in terms of our system, it is the Cabinet, and the Cabinet as a whole, not just some members of the Cabinet, who has the constitutional power. They are supposed to exercise that power. That power cannot just be the blanket delegation of that power is not possible. Also because the Cabinet is the ones that are held accountable by Parliament. So if you delegate the power out, there's no checks and balances in the system. We haven't yet had a response from the Presidency to say what the authority of the Command Council is, where it gets its legal authority from, and what actual powers it has, and how that relates to the Cabinet. That is a concern. We have to wait and see what the response is. Because obviously, just because there's an emergency, it's not a state of emergency, and so all the checks and balances remain, or they should remain, and Parliament should hold the executive accountable. Parliament should ask the same kind of questions that the lawyers asked in the letter yesterday. The fact that they haven't is a bit concerning.
The conundrum, though, surely is, on the one hand, managing the health consequences of the crisis, which is critical, and so far seems to be working against the freedoms or the challenges to those freedoms that you're referring to.
Yes, and that is why the Constitution, people who made the Constitution envisaged that. So they said you can limit rights, especially for such an important purpose as this, because it will be life and death. But you have to do so in a way that is justifiable. And so you have to ask, is it proportionate? Are there other ways of achieving the goal that will limit the rights less than they are limited now? I think that is a very important question, because it seems sometimes that some of the regulations go further than they actually that is necessary to go in terms of limiting rights to achieve the purpose. You have to always remember that the rights there needs to be proportionality. It doesn't always seem as if the people who decide on these regulations take serious enough account of the need for the proportionality to be there.
Let me slip a final one in. What is also concerning, surely, is that we have these powers and we have these structures. For instance, this National Joint Operations and Intelligence Structure, which is an entity established, I understand, by a cabinet memo without any legislation at all. We have all of this, and post-COVID, surely it's going to become more difficult to unravel all of this.
Well, we don't really know. There are obviously concerns, but all the structures set up in terms of the Disaster Management Act, they will be dismantled, because once the disaster ends, that ends. Then those provisions cannot go ahead. If there are other informal structures, that is once again it is for Parliament in the normal course of events to hold those people accountable. Just because it deals with security and intelligence, it doesn't mean Parliament doesn't have oversight. And they should actually take up the power that they constitutionally have. In fact, as the Constitutional Court has said on more one occasion, the duty they have to hold the executive accountable.
Professor Pierre de Vos in Cape Town, thank you very much for joining us. This is ENCA.